There you go.
All right. So, yeah, I think it's been 3 weeks or so since our last Zoom, and we have been busy, busy, busy. So the probably the first thing we want to tell everyone this week is we are now feature complete for Tritium. What that means is that all of the major features that we had earmarked to be going into Tritium release are complete to a point that we're now happy to start testing on them. It's a really exciting milestone for us. We gave ourselves to the end of May to get to that point. It doesn't mean that we don't have work ahead of us, because we do. We've still got bugs to fix, a huge amount of testing ahead of us, obviously. Um, but we're happy that the features that are in there are what we wanted to get done, um, right, and into Tritium. Um, the caveat to that, I would say, is that the API is something that's sort of ongoing and being done in parallel to the rest of the Tritium features. The API, as it stands today, contains all the functions that we wanted to get done for Tritium as kind of a minimum set of functions for doing things like, creating assets, creating tokens, accounts, sending, receiving Nexus, split dividends, payments on tokenized assets, and all those kind of features. That's all done and in. But there are other features that we're developing in parallel to the rest of the testing we're doing on Tritium. So that's where we're at. We're feature complete. This week we started our testing phase. We've earmarked May for a whole month of internal testing. And that'll be hardening the code, fixing any bugs we find, making sure that everything's documented well. And we're planning to carry that through May, and then towards I think probably the middle end of May, perhaps the week of the 17th of May, we're going to update the public testnet with our latest.
Hey, Paul,
Yep.
wherever you say May, you should be saying June because May's over.
Oh, sorry. You're absolutely right. Sorry, I've got a note written down. I've got May on my note, and that's why it's confusing me. It's June. You're absolutely right. Geez, that's how hard we've been working. I don't even know what month it is anymore. Right. So we've earmarked June for testing. You're absolutely right, and we have kind of penned in the week commencing the 17th of June to update the public testnet with the latest version as well. And then so we can invite people to start testing code around then. It might be the week after. We'll see how we're going. But that's where we're at with the feature complete anyway. And I'm not going to go through all of the features that we've and tasks that we've completed over the last few weeks, because it's quite numerous. I perhaps will do an update separately on that, but we've got through a lot of features. Any notable ones you think are worth mentioning, Colin, that we've done maybe in the last 3 weeks?
Well,
I'm sure you'd like to talk about the multiple contract stuff, because that's just
cool. That's really cool. I guess we can start we did a lot of load testing that kind of kicked off a lot towards the end. I got it running 150 transactions per second. Post-processing was, I think, about 70 milliseconds, 60 milliseconds for 800 transactions. I think I calculated around like 9,000 to 11,000 transactions per second post-processing capabilities. Pre-processing 17,000. The LOP kind of started to break down a little bit there though, because it's kind of an old code. So the load tests were cool. So we've done a lot of hardening as well. We've done feature complete stuff. I did extra to the operations layer too. Went it through all of the stuff to get it production ready, as far as, going through notes, making sure that's all clear. And then validation scripts, or now they're called conditions, are implemented in there. So you can put conditions on your contracts, exchanges between one another. Those are really cool. That's where we have our register virtual machine. So you can do like reversible transactions within a certain time window. You can send a wildcard. You can send to somebody's Genesis and then have any account that they can claim from that. I mean, it's a new programming language basically, and it's kind of a lower level programming language that sets the conditions because a contract is, I guess, an agreement between two people. So whenever you have two sig chains that are actors in, let's say, some sort of operation, that's debit, credit, transfer, and claim. That's where you have a condition that binds between them. So that's where we also get the DEX, which is pretty cool that I'm sure you guys will be excited about. I didn't know if we'd be able to make the DEX in for Tritium, but it looks like the API layer is not going to support it natively, which means you're not going to be able to search assets right out of the gate, but we'll be able to add that functionality additionally as we get forward. But right now I'm just writing unit tests for a DEX transaction, trying to exchange some tokens between one another, which is getting pretty close. So that's really cool that we'll have that. We've got namespaces in, names, which is another really cool set of features where you can essentially purchase a namespace and then you use that namespace and create a name in there. And then that becomes another asset that you can sell on the DEX. Now, the DEX, I think, is going to be a really, really, how should I say it, vital to the actual ecosystem for Nexus itself. The NXS cryptocurrency token, I think, is going to drive a lot of utility towards it just by utilizing the DEX, because that's going to become the main liquidity provider that most people are going to be buying and selling assets with. And then what else did we get? Multiple contracts per transaction. So another really cool thing is you can basically batch transactions, or you batch a bunch of contracts in one transaction. Now, the cool thing about it is it's really simple to use. So you basically, to process, you only have to process one digital signature. With Bitcoin, every input, you have to process every single one of those scripts and do an ECDSA verification, which is very computationally intensive. With this, you just have one batch, and then you can do, 100 contracts on it if you want, so that you can, with one call or one user action, do a whole, plethora of different things. So that's cool. Then sig chains iterate both ways, and I also implemented a key switching algorithm. So right now, one of the cool things about a signature chain is it decouples your keys from your actual accounts. So you can at any time change your key, which means you can use Brainpool, or you can use Falcon, or we're going to support other key types, like if you want to use the Bitcoin key type or any other different curve types that OpenSSL natively supports, and it remembers that and it verifies that. Recovery phrases are in the code now, so you can recover your sig chain if you forgot your password with 20 words and your birthday or something like that. That's all in there. We're just finishing spiffing up some of the API stuff. And then I guess that kind of segues a little bit into the fee model. I guess that's probably a little bit out of context, unless we should probably wait to finish. What do you think, Paul?
I'm happy to, well, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I tell you, that's before we get into the economic stuff that I know we're really keen to talk about today. Let me go back to what we did when Mike and I and Alex came over to the US, because we were there to talk about the fees and stuff. So that trip was largely focused on planning what's coming up in Armin. That's not to say that Tritium's finished yet and out the door, because we obviously know it's not. But it was a good point for us to get together as a team and work out what's coming up. We also had to discuss what the fees are going to look like for Tritium and Tritium++ and beyond, because it's no longer a case that there is a small fee for doing a simple transaction like we have in our current UTXO model. We now have these transactions that do much more complex operations and multiple operations, multiple contracts per transaction. So there's that to factor in. We wanted some of these transactions to be able to be free, but then how do we control spam and attacks and things like that? And then we also recognize that doing certain transactions, such as registering data on the network, so creating assets or registering tokens, registering namespaces, these kinds of actions, then they are going to need to command much different and higher fees than, say, a normal transaction, just to stop people from going out on day one and registering all the names that they possibly can, and for free, because that's, we want to avoid people doing that. So we spent some time discussing that and figuring out what those fees might look like. I don't have the numbers to hand. I'm not going to share them now anyway, because they're not finalized. But we came up with a few ideas around how fees will be generated. There's certainly going to be a higher fee for registering a token than just a normal transaction. So I think registering an asset might command a fee. Registering a token, certainly registering a namespace will be quite an expensive thing to do. People understand why that might be. And then there's coming later, not just yet, but coming later will be the possibility to register a name for an asset or anything you want, but without a namespace. So this would be a globally accessible name, so like a token ticker or something like that, and that will probably be the thing that commands the highest fees. I think one decision we did make was that we're going to allow 2 transactions per block. Was it for free? I think that might have been one of the final decisions we did make.
One per block, yeah. So it's kind of a throttle. So it's one. Otherwise, we just have too much iteration that we have to do.
Okay.
Hey, April. Good to see you. And April's son. Cool. Awesome. And my daughter's running around here like a little monkey if you see her. Anyway, so yeah, it's basically 1 transaction per block, and then any more you're going to have to pay a higher amount of fee. And then I guess this kind of segues into the fee model. There's been some discussion about it, and I guess the proposal is like the fees should go somewhere. People don't like the burning aspect of it. So my proposal is that we're going to put it into a reserve. Those of you that know how the reserves work, it's kind of just a variable that everybody keeps track of in the state of the block. So the problem that we came up is if you give it to a miner, and there's 10,000 Nexus for a namespace, let's say, right? Because you'd buy a namespace to invest in that namespace, such as .com, and then you'd be able to register any name in that and then sell those names to people so that you can create kind of a business. And that's another driving of the utility of the Nexus token itself, purchasing these things, because you build, I think, a stronger economy when you start building ways to monetize inside that economy. And so this is one way to do that. You can basically buy your vanity namespace and sell those assets on the DEX and everything like that. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. If it's 10,000 Nexus to purchase that specific namespace, we don't want all the miners competing over that. And that's like a large amount of Nexus that would go just on one block, right? And then you'd create a massive competition, and then miners would maybe try to attack each other and see if they get that block. So what we propose is putting all of the fees into a reserve. And then the way the reserves work is if there's more in the reserves, then you get a higher reward out of it, right? Because then it'll use that to deplete the reserve. And if there's less, then you get less of a reward. So what we could do is we could have that actually go into miners, stakers, and then maybe ambassador developers, or eventually when we get the DAO done, maybe a community fund where the fee reserves can be pulled out by community contracts or things like that, so that can start to fund other things that can be kind of a help recycling system with the network. And then miners would get their take off of it, stakers would, and that way, like, these large fees could actually be more evenly distributed and redistributed to everybody that's kind of forming the consensus of the network. And that's actually easy to implement too. So that's kind of what we were thinking about that, because I know that there's been some question about, what economic model do we want to be having? How do we make sure that the NXS token itself has utility and that there's a strong demand for it by, making it useful. So that's kind of one of the ideas I guess we're just throwing around as far as that. That's my proposal. I think anytime. Yeah.
I think it's worth saying that we had already put in our newsletter that we had planned to burn the fees, and that decision was simply that we thought that was going to be the fairest option for everyone, just to burn them. And there is an argument for that, but there's, because then you can see that that's sort of benefiting everyone. And that's where this debate loomed from, that perhaps it shouldn't benefit everyone equally to burn fees. Fees should be there to benefit those who are furthering the network, who are doing work, which is why they should go back to miners and stakers alike. So there's been some suggestion already that if we did go that route, that maybe it should only go to stakers rather than miners. Does anyone have any? Well, actually, does anyone have anything to say so far on the suggestion that fees should, rather than being burnt, should go back to miners and stakers? And if so, via this, by the reserve mechanism that Klein described. Does anyone have any feedback on that?
You can unmute and speak too.
And if you don't want to unmute and speak, just put it in the Zoom group chat or something and I'll relay it for you. At this point, you kind of need to assume that silence is consensus, right? I know people are not totally happy about giving feedback in real time. So, you know, you can talk to us after the fact in you know, in Slack or Telegram. We'll you can contact us and talk to us about it then as well.
We've got working groups in the team Slack too, namely the economics working group for this specific one. So if you want to come join the discussions, we wanted to kind of open this up in order to, if it is burnt, it will create inflation. No, it's actually, if it's recycled, April, it'll actually create inflation. So there's a natural inflation with the creating of the new mint from the miners and the stakers. So burning it, we thought of that as to counteract that inflation in a way that would constantly have, I guess, a neutral growth rate, which would be 0 or maybe slightly deflationary. But it seems like in one sense that creates incentive problems with miners too, because I think if there's more fees in there, then they're going to be more incentivized to actually include the transactions. And then the burning thing too, I think psychologically, it doesn't have as much value to people. People just think, oh, well, you know, economically there's less supply and whatever, so therefore that would be that. But there's no real way to quantify that. So I think if the fees go back to people and be redistributed slowly, instead of it just being one for one, they would be slowly pulled out of that reserve by everybody involved, which I think could even open up, you know, community funds or things like that. And then the DEX, we could make transaction fees on that pays to that pool, essentially, or pays to that reserve, so that essentially it would become a new pool of money that could only be pulled out of that reserve by specific rules, such as a miner mining a block or a staker staking a block, or maybe in the DAO community contracts that are validated, or, you know, maybe some goes to ambassador contracts, or maybe we split percentages for each one of those. But what is the definition of staker? But does that make sense, April, or do you still kind of disagree? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. What is the definition of staker? A staker is a person that is operating a wallet that has staking enabled, that receives stake rewards for running a node and builds up trust. So a staker would be somebody that generally is running a wallet 24/7 in order to build up trust and receive a higher stake reward rate, which goes from 0.5% to 3%.
Murdoch, he's asking if there's any way we can put it up for a network-wide vote, or is the tech not there yet? No, the tech isn't there yet to allow voting like that.
Plus feature.
Yeah. So in terms of making a decision on what we do with fees, the best we can do is present it today as an option, and then maybe do a vote in Slack and Telegram, and you know, you can join an economics working group, and I guess we're just going to have to take everyone's opinions via those polls and make a decision on that. That's probably the best we can do. We're not going to make a decision today. You know, right now we're not trying to ask for consensus amongst the 17, 18 people that are on this call. I think we're going to need to ask for more input than that.
And this team Slack is open too, so anybody that would like an invite, just contact any of us and say you'd like an invite to come join the economics working group, because we really want to get that discussion completed. Going through, instead of burning fee, why not just donate it to local charities? That was exactly when we have the DAO, because the DAO is a Tritium++ feature, mainly because we want to build up the runway for that to happen, so that there's anticipation and understanding. And I guess we can explain some of the way the architecture that we have. I guess maybe we do that at this moment too, Paul.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that came out of the discussions for when we had everybody here. We were planning at Tritium++. Now it was kind of Jules's idea or concept of it, but think of it as you have a number of chips, like, you're betting, right? And you can take any chips and you can put it on a specific color. So your stake times your actual, your trust, that's your total amount that you have, your voting power that you have available to vote. And what you can do then is you can take 20% of that and you can vote for one contract and 30% and vote for another contract up to 100%, which basically means that you run a limited amount of voting power. So it essentially reflects your holdings in your voting weight, but you can only do so much with that holding. So that if you like US, you'd vote 30%. If you like Australia, you'd vote 70%, and you only have 100% to vote with. And then that sets the initial percentages of the income for an embassy. And then there's a second voting group on top of that is the embassy voting group. So they each have a certain percentage that they're allocated. So let's say in this case, it would be what it is now, 20% to Australia, 20% to, or it's actually 25 to Australia, 25 to UK, and 50 to the US. Then those embassies then have 25% vote, and 50% vote, and they can allocate. US could vote 30% towards Australia if Australia needed more money. So the initial percentage allocation comes from the L2 layer or the trust keys that you vote with the amount of stake and trust you have available, basically allocating it wherever you feel. And then if you ever want to change it, say, well, US didn't do something I liked as much as Australia did, then you could say, well, I'm going to move my 40% from US and I'm going to make that 30%, and then I'm going to give an extra 10% to Australia. And that it's going to be a real-time vote that you'll have a vote once per month just to reduce voter volatility, where you can change the actual stake that you're staking for each embassy. And then from those percentages, embassies can then distribute those percentages between one another. If, let's say, the vote didn't come out where they need to be budgeted correctly, Australia could say, we'd be, hey, we're 5% short on our funds. Australia could say, oh, well, we'll vote some of our 5% to you. And then that way the embassies can kind of reallocate within each other too and kind of share that so that you have two voting groups to start the DAO. And that's how it's going to launch in Tritium++. And then with that, just to segue with some of these comments, people saying, well, why don't you donate to local charities from some of the fees? That's exactly what I think. If we added another type of contract where you could get a community contract or a charity contract, the charity contracts could come out of the fee pool as well, or maybe only 30% of the fees go to charity and 70% goes to minors, or maybe 50-50, whatever we decide. And then those contracts could be voted in. So, and that you would have 100% of your vote too. You have 100% per contract type. So for an ambassador contract, you can vote 100% between all of the ambassador contracts, 10% here, 30% here, what would that be, 60% here. And then a community set of contracts, you could say, I want to vote 50% to this one or 30% to this one and whatever. And then those could work similar to the ambassador contracts, but they'd be based off of, a portion of the fee model, which would allow that funding to redistribute to charities, or they could redistribute to community projects or things like that. And obviously ambassador funds are available to any community member. And then the way that the DAO would be able to constantly change, which is an important thing, since the percentages are set initially by the average of everybody's percentage vote towards you, which means your trust as an embassy is directly proportional to your revenue, which creates a higher accountability for embassies, because then the embassy themselves can see in real time the percentage that people have voted in confidence towards them. And it creates kind of a, well, what's the best way to keep somebody accountable? Well, you make them accountable directly proportional to their money. So you get, it's almost like people's money is the money that they're almost voting their money for your money, in a sense. But the way that let's say a German embassy wanted to come in and say, hey, we're the new guys on the block, but we don't need much. They could maybe get, 3%, 5% of the votes or something like that. Or maybe some of the embassies say, okay, well, we'll vote some of our 5% to that German embassy. And people like that. Now, if that happened in an instance where the German embassy wasn't well liked, and it was an embassy that actually had given them some of their percentage of revenue, then that embassy that did that would indirectly be related to that German embassy that could then get their funds reduced if people decide to move some of their stake into another one. So that way it's kind of like placing your bets, for lack of better terms, where you have a certain amount of chips and then you can place each chip on what embassies and what you believe each one should get paid based on a percentage of the total reserves. And that'll happen once a week. The deposit will happen so that your trust is directly proportional to your performance. And then that ties in a lot of other really cool things that we were talking about. Community fund, things like that we can do with the fees. The DAO mechanism, vote, how to distribute maybe monthly, quarterly. So to answer your question, iPhone, let's see. Yeah, I mean, you could vote to burn the reserve, I guess, if you want to make it. I mean, you could make it go to a burned contract that nobody has access to if you wanted to. That's perfectly possible as long as that exists. Yeah, that's definitely possible. And it would be, the vote would have kind of a threshold. Like once I vote, I stake in. For that specific contract or for your specific voting period, you have like a once a month vote. And that way you reduce voter volatility. Now, I mean, that number is kind of what we came up with ourselves. So if there's any feedback that you guys have of maybe that should be 2 weeks or whatever, we figured a month that you can change your votes once a month so that way there's enough time for things to be assessed and moved. And it's not going to be like everybody votes at the same time. It's 1 month from the last time you voted. So it's always going to be a consistently moving voting system that's going to be fluid. And it's going to be able to fluctuate and change and allow new embassies to become allocated or deallocated. And, you know, it creates a really good feedback loop too, I think, for the performance of the embassies and how much trust the community has in them. And then them themselves can help each other by, you know, giving some of their percentage to another embassy if they happen to be low on funds that month or whatever. So that you create kind of two layers, but it's set from here, and then the embassies can kind of make their changes too. So it becomes a really fluid voting system. And so that's kind of our design. And we can discuss that, not in the economics working group. I think we have the social working group. So if you guys want to kind of join some of those discussions, we'll lay out the whole DAO architecture. That's the main flagship feature of Tritium++. Tritium++ is just a post-Tritium hard fork that contains new features and also adjustments. You know, when we launch Tritium, we may launch it with certain constant values of maybe amount for fees or anything like that. And then Tritium++ allows us to make those adjustments. Yeah, not a problem. I'm down with whatever the consensus is. Just that. Okay. But yeah, so I figure that's a good segue into that. But and then there's a little bit extra too associated with how do we help in incentivize in like networks to communicate, or how do we make sure that the public network itself is utilized? Well, I believe most assets themselves are going to exist on the public network. I mean, the DEX is going to be running on the public network. People are going to run their main accounts on the public network. They're going to be using Nexus as the fuel for a lot of that. They're going to be paying transaction fees. They're going to be buying namespaces on the public network. They're going to be buying names on the public network. The only time I envision there being hybrid networks or private networks is when a very large business or corporation decides that they need their own user base and want to build their own ecosystem. And they would have 3 tiers for a hybrid. So the first tier is just you eject hashes. We're making that kind of proof of work orientated so that it reduces actual node processing. If we charge the fee for every hybrid hash, it would cause a massive bottleneck in the actual network processing. The way of the hash is now, it's very fast. It takes absolutely no computational effort to verify. It doesn't have to verify signature. So that way we have a really, really scalable solution there. And then the tier 2 would be actually permissioned access schemes. So what hybrid means is it's a combination of public and private. So a hybrid architecture or a hybrid chain would essentially inject its hashes into the public chain, but it would also be able to set access levels. And we use that with EIDs. So that means this specific node with its EID would only have access to a certain part of the global state.
So could you just give an example of where that, like the kind of thing that might, where you might use that?
Let's say a service provider. Let's say you have like a music ecosystem or something. And not everybody wants all of their copyrights discoverable as a service provider. So service providers themselves would not be able to access other service providers' data. It would be the validator nodes that would be able to say, you can view this. So I could have my own little ecosystem as a service provider of my specific copyrights or anything like that, but I wouldn't be able to read other people's unless they allowed me to. That would be kind of a basic one so that you can kind of tier that access. The validators would have the global state. And then service providers would have kind of a more localized state depending on what they were granted. And then the user would just have API interface access directly through. So anytime that you do that, there's going to be a fee that is required for setting that. Think of the SIG chain on the public network. The access control SIG chain is kind of like the hybrid network is owned by said business. I mean, that's the model is the businesses will want to own their network. And that's where their access control SIG chain comes in. Now they can charge membership fees for other service providers to join their ecosystem. And then that pays a fee to the network in order to add or allocate or deauthorize certain EIDs into their network. And then what that does is that builds up a hybrid signature chain too, so that they become a part of the actual public network ecosystem. And that drives more value and, I guess, usage of the Nexus cryptocurrency token in parallel with it. I don't see businesses really using just a private network. They're going to run hybrid because it's more suited for them, and it's going to run hybrid out of box. And so those are going to be some of the things embassies can work kind of as brokers or things like that for helping them pay some of their fees. So there is a fee model built into that. There's just the 3 tiers, and it's the base tier that's free, just like it's free for any user to debit and credit. That's kind of a base tier user. And then the more advanced your features are that you start utilizing, then the more it's going to cost. Essentially, and then that we talked would go into the fee pool, and then the fee pool could be used, or the fee reserve, and then that could be used for whatever people decided.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people need to remember about blockchain technology is yes, it's very useful. You can kind of see why businesses will want to use it privately, but the whole point of it is that it's a ledger of information that they want to have data proof over. And in order to do that, they need to allow some kind of public verification, some kind of public viewing of that data. There's no point just having it all private. Otherwise, they can just do that in their own databases as they can today. There's no point having a mathematically provable ledger that DLT offers. The whole point is that there will need to be some kind of public viewing of that private data, which is why there's this even if you took I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. A bank might have a blockchain for their internal customer database, and they pass that data around amongst the branches and so on and so forth. But then there might be an auditor who gets brought in to make sure that that data is being used properly, or maybe there's an insurance company that wants to be able to suck some of that data out. And suddenly they need to provide access to that private blockchain in a way that's that's provable, and that's where you get this whole concept of the hybrid
too. That's a really big thing, is the writable access. You can't just give anybody access to your private database to be able to put data into it. This way, like, different service providers in that ecosystem have write permissions in their local scope, so that they can write to their SIG chain, and they can maybe share pieces of information so that, you create. That's where the really power of a blockchain comes in, that really brings a lot of use to a business, is the business can create an ecosystem of many different actors, and all those actors together form, I guess, the utility of it by sharing and monetizing that data themselves and creating memberships and everything like that. And then it needs the public network itself to have the public access SIG chain that the hybrid network verifies itself off of. Otherwise, you have a massive configuration issue. If you want to add a new validator, you're going to have to update all of the other nodes. And it's just an erroneous process. It's a very manual process to not use the public network. So there's going to be a very strong incentive to use the public network because it's going to provide a lot of utility. But then the public network doesn't need to be loaded down with all of that data. And they can also retain their tiered levels of privacy for certain pieces of that data and gain some of the security of the public network while still providing utility to the Nexus cryptocurrency token. So most of the use cases, I think, most of the applications are probably going to be built on the main public network. I don't see the need for a private network unless they're building kind of like an open ecosystem, or they're a very large company that has a larger requirement for it. And those are
the data volume and transaction volume and stuff, right? Which is why we have fees on the public network. There's plenty of use cases where you want a public network because you want public participation. Some kind of ID verification. SIG chains are just a perfect way of having some sort of global ID system. In which case, you want everyone having the ability to connect to one network. That is a use case for the public network. But then if there's a use case that's kind of like that, where the amount of data that's going to be needed on the public network and the amount of transactions means it's going to cost a lot. Well, that's when you can start offloading that use case to a hybrid network where the data is handled in a separate network, but the access control to it is done through our private network. So it's kind of like a spider web. It's
public. Yeah. And then that also, it opens up kind of a new voting group. So when we get the full DAO, with the 6 different voting groups, April was pretty familiar with that with the social org paper. The private network or hybrid network sig chains will together form one of the voting groups. So people that run hybrid networks will essentially have some sort of voting interest in the rest of it, because the idea of the DAO is to have different voting groups that together balance each other out. If you leave it all to the miners, they're going to make decisions that are just for, mining. And if you leave it all to the stakers, then they're going to do that. Or if you leave it just to the developers, we'll have our own opinions. So that way you combine all of the interests of the network into that public vote. So that opens the doors for that enterprise level, I guess you could call it, voting group based on how much money they spend. That's how you weight it, how much money they've spent in the public network, which, helps them have more influence in their own enterprise voting group, which is one of 6 voting groups. And it takes 4 out of 6 groups to ratify anything, like new ambassador contracts, developer contracts, things such as that. So it's a piece of that, and it helps these businesses have an influence into the consensus, because everybody's going to have invested interest in it. And it's not about saying one person's better or worse than another. It's about making sure that everybody that's got an invested interest in the success of the system should have a say. But kind of making that say more isolated with people of like intentions is the best way to say it. I mean, I think the biggest failure of democracy is we're trying to gain a single perspective from a single group of people that have varying interests or varying value system. If you can kind of have people collected together that might have more similar value systems and get a consensus on that, you're going to get a clearer consensus than if you just try to take everybody and say, okay, well, 51% of you means that you win, because one opinion or one type of value system may contain more people. And then that could end up completely always swaying the voting system in favor of that specific value. So that's kind of the concepts that we're going for with this DAO. And I think that's going to be really important, as we're moving forward, to kind of take off the training wheels for Nexus and Tritium++, and which is really exciting. I'm really excited to see that come. That's one of my favorite things I've been super excited about lately, because I mean, we've been working on this how should I say it, social architecture and the way to implement it for a long time. It's just needed the proper foundations in order to set it. That's why I haven't built a voting system yet, because we needed to get everything to where it is now technologically. And then Mercury Miners says, all this utility, it seems very well monetized, except not if you burn the fees.
I'm not sure that whether he was here for
Merc, so you have a little update. The proposal is, and you're very familiar with the reserves. So we add a new reserve. That new reserve is filled up by fees. Oh, he was here. So yeah, well, I agree then it's very well monetized, except not if you burn the fees. Yeah. Oh, your mic's dead.
KYC database is an example. Yeah. Okay, fine. You go back to
KYC is more of a hybrid thing. If you have KYC, GDPR, they're obviously going to want to run a hybrid network, and then that hybrid network would carry proofs of that data and use the hybrid network to verify the chain of events in that data that would connect with their database, so that you can verify the integrity of the data records in the database, because you check some of that data into the hybrid network, and then the hybrid network checks itself off of the public network. So it's kind of like a 3-tier, and that's how it would work, because GDPR is a big thing. And there's a lot of businesses that just are going to want to keep everything private in their own, self-contained ecosystem. So this way we create a connection between the businesses, community, and the main network, so that there's a constant flow of energy and currency between the two. But then by doing so, by providing really, how should I say, unique value for both of them. So the way that we're looking at it right now is we're probably going to remove the fee burning model. And I think miners will be very happy with that. That means that there's going to be more money to be mined. You're going to make more on it, but it's going to be a slow release, so that it's not just all given to one miner. It'll be evenly distributed to all of the miners over a period of time.
Miners and stakers. I know that we're kind of assuming the two are one and the same, but just for everyone's clarity.
Yep.
So Merck doesn't want to give it to the proof of work miners, only to stakers. And there is an argument for this, and I
They're bastards.
No matters, I know. Yeah. There is an argument for this. Only giving it to stakers based on the fact that stakers are putting their time. Well, no, maybe miners are too. I was going to say they're putting their time and their money into it. So they should earn fees. Also, there's already a fair reward going to miners. Miners already have their incentive through the.
Well, I think it's good. I mean, it's good for miners to be happy because if we create more money to be made in the actual fee for the miners, it's going to make the mining network more secure. It's going to make it better. Right now, since the fees are burnt, not a lot of miners include transactions because there's nothing. So what we can do is we can enforce and say, well, we're going to soft ban blocks if you're relaying empty blocks, which is a rule that we should put in place. Or we say like, hey, well, you'll earn a little bit more money for your mining reward, maybe up to 50% of the current mining reward. Maybe you earn up to double what your reward would naturally be. And then I think that'll create a stronger mining economy. And I think we'd get more transactions being processed by miners. And I think overall, it's going to decentralize the mining channels more because right now, I mean, it's very difficult to profit on it because there's, the FPGAs and then there's prime miners and things like that. And there's only so much money to go around. So if you make it more profitable all around, right, then maybe we make it so that you get a higher fee if you've made less blocks from your SIG chain, right? I mean, you could do something like that or whatever to just reward more of the smaller miners in that case. But I think I'd really like to see the mining network become more decentralized. And I think this is one way to do it is to make miners happier. That's my personal opinion. But
yeah, in terms of when this might come into play, I mean, are we too late into the Tritium development to?
No, this is really easy to implement. That's what's so beautiful about it. We already have a reserve system built, right?
Yep.
So all we need to do is just say, when you put your transaction out, there's the fee that comes off of it, whatever that fee may be, and then all the fees totaled up in a block go to that extra reserve when the block is processed.
So Mage just made a comment that all mining fees should go to miners. Do you mean all transaction fees? And if so, why miners? And do you mean proof of work miners or do you mean stakers as well? Because they're also doing work and verifying the network. Can you just clarify what you meant by that, Made?
All miners. So are you stating, April, that you think fees should not go to any of the proof of stake nodes and it should only go to miners?
I read that the other way, that she means it should go to both proof of work and proof of stake miners equally.
I think she's right right now.
Yep, good. Okay.
Yep, that's the plan made. But it's going to be evenly distributed. So it's almost going to be kind of like a pool of fees. So everybody that processes transactions is going to be a part of that pool. And they'll basically get a fee associated with, how much their reward should have been and then how many transactions they process in that block. So, I mean, if you obviously make an empty block and there's transactions in the memory pool, you're going to get no fee, things like that. But I'll just start people with Nexus again.
You do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that type of mentality, I think, is going to be good. I mean, and maybe we go up to the total amount. So, I mean, that would bring the reward up to 12 Nexus per block for miners, or even more. I think when we start getting fees, I mean, you have one namespace that's purchased, which I'm going to buy a namespace when it comes out. 10,000 Nexus that can be redistributed to the miners like over the course of the day. I think that would be good, and I think it would make the mining network a lot more healthy and a lot more diversified, personally. So we agree completely, Made it should go to miners and stakers, all proof of work and all proof of stake, but with no bias over one or the other, just based on what you would naturally get, essentially, is the idea. Cool.
All right. So, well, that's kind of the proposal anyway, and I think we should try to summarize that into a poll in the community Slack, and see what people think, and then we'll invite people into the economics working group as well, into the team Slack, so we can discuss this further. And I think we probably soon should start the discussion on what those fees look like. I know that we already have an idea. We discussed this when I was over in Phoenix of what those fees should look like for all the different types of transactions, what it might cost to register a token and an asset, and so on and so forth. We kind of know what that should look like, but we shouldn't just assume that that's what everyone believes as well. So we'll do the same thing. We'll put a poll on, what it should be cost. And one thing should really
economics working group though. I'd really like to get more community involvement in the working groups. We have quite a few working groups in the team Slack. So just join that group, and that way we can have specific, and then you can verify who's who. Paul's post and thought Zoom is, yeah, it's today, Keith. Sorry. We'll upload this so you can rehash on everything. Get more than they're already getting. That would be the idea that, prime miners would earn more. Or we also have had the discussion of deactivating the prime channel in light of Argon 2, which that's been another discussion that I think we could continue to have. I think we said we'd give it a month or so. Jack has got his miner pretty close. But I think maybe if it's more profitable, then, more people would maybe be able to join it. Prime miners would end up getting more, so would hashing miners, and so would proof of stake nodes. We can make a bias to make prime miners get less if we want. That's not hard to do, but I think that's probably not the fairest. Give it to proof of stake only. If we give it to proof of stake only, we might as well just deactivate all the proof of work, personally. Because right now proof of work miners don't even really process too many transactions. I see, some hashing miners do. Prime miners don't care. So, I don't think it's not going to create a healthy ecosystem. We have 3 channels. They should go to all 3 channels. And if we can't get the prime miner up to par, like we can maybe leave the prime channel deactivation to Tritium++. If we decide to deactivate it, I would rather not. Jack's really actually close on. If you want to give an update, Jack, on the prime miner, that'd be actually a good segue into it right now.
Yeah, got a little bit of feedback there. So the prime miner, it's pretty close. It's broken up into sieving and testing. The testing, I have improved about 33% since the last time I originally released the prime miner. So making big strides on the format testing. The sieving needs a little bit more testing and work to get right, because trying to speed that part of the algorithm up, it requires a lot of testing, because you got to experiment with different offsets. And so just working on getting the prime ratio, getting that up, which I've done successfully using higher primordial, and I'm probably speaking alien right now. So yeah. Also the new miner.
That's what everyone wants to know. Is it faster than it was?
Yes, it is faster.
How much faster?
About 33% faster than the last time I released the open source prime GPU miner. It's called Nexus miner right now, and that's in a private GitHub repo under Nexusoft, which we're going to open up soon, because we don't need to be paying for private repos anymore. Because that's a lot of extra that we don't need to pay for anymore. So we're going to cut down on those costs for GitHub. So
yeah, if it's I know that it's still in development, and there's several people who are contributing to that. If we can make it open source now or soon, then people can at least try it, even if you're still working on it. I think the point, though, is that you're trying to make this miner fast enough that we can make the prime channel more competitive again, so that we don't have to consider sunsetting it and moving to a new proof of work, right?
Right.
Can I make a comment to? Keith is trolling me. I'd like to make the comment too that I think the algorithm, of the prime numbers is great, and I always envision this to be happening where over time we'd see the prime channel be overrun with GPUs and push CPUs off of it, and then the hashing channel start to have FPGAs and ASICs. And that's how it was designed by nature, because I believe more specialized mining hardware does create more security in the network, and you don't want to disincentivize that. Because if you just make it CPU only with super memory hard algorithms, what's going to happen is you're going to be eaten by botnets. And that's a little bit worse. Paul and I have had many experiences of fighting botnets, which, before the super miners, it was a giant botnet that was mining on the Prime channel, right? So I think it's good to see this evolution. I think GPU miners are more specialized. So I would really, really like, and Jack will be able to go all in. And yeah, he's been, fighting to get back in his Prime miner. Yeah, we've had to pull him out of Tritium, and he's just like, oh, I want to work on my Prime miner. But I would really like to see that happen personally. I think that's the most important thing for it, is for us, instead of doing some developer made decision that we made the rules of the game, and that we end up as a team being able to compete with those Prime miners, which I think we're pretty close. So if everybody's okay with that, I'd say we should keep that to Tritium ++ and try to get the Prime channel decentralized by then, which would then go hand in hand with having fees go to the miners. I think that would create stronger mining network. It would double the profitability of the mining network. So what would happen is it would double the difficulty without any additional inflation, right? At least, unless,
that depends on the amount of fees, because it's only going to double if there's a lot of, depending on how many.
Well, yeah, if there's fees. And I think there's going to be quite a lot of fees when Tritium comes out, because there's just a lot of really great features to use on it. So I'm seeing that happening, or I'm hoping that would be happening a lot more. But yeah, I guess if everybody's okay with that.
So Mercury Miner is arguing that that miners are there to profit, and therefore they're going to sell. So why give them any more fees? Because
they secure the network.
Well, the one argument is that they're there to secure the network. The second argument is that if they mine and therefore have more Nexus, they can stake that Nexus and get more fees that way. It doesn't necessarily create. I don't agree that it necessarily creates this downward pressure all the time. And I'm not sure that all miners just want to profit. Maybe they do. I don't know.
We have a really unique set of miners. Paul and me both used to mine Nexus a lot. We ran the first few pools in Nexus back in 2014. A lot of people mine, especially being the prime numbers, because they like it. They think it's fun. And, proof of work is becoming less and less used more and more these days. So I think it's really cool to keep that alive and keep our kind of hybrid architecture with the proof of work. And I think they do help balance the consensus mechanism along with proof of stake. I think pure proof of stake just isn't as strong. And the way that the three-dimensional chain is designed, or a 3D block, is the last layer is that final seal from the miners. So we have to keep mining in some way, shape, or form. Okay. And I'd like to see fees go that way. But
they're making this argument here in the Zoom group chat that miners are just there for profit, and there's a difference between hobby miners who are there through because they want to skew the network, because they want to be part of Nexus. There's a difference between those and the super miners, the power miners who have large farms. They're just there to profit, and those are the ones that are going to dominate. And that's a good point as well. And do you want to give them more fees than they're already getting, because they're not there to care about Nexus network so much as just profit? Well, I don't know. That might be true, but they're still doing a job. They're securing the network. But then you can also argue that they're getting their mining rewards already for securing the network. So why do they need to get any more? I don't know. So it's a discussion that still needs to be had. We can have that in the economics working group. We can even put it to a poll. We don't have to say it one way or the other if enough people decide that.
And based on Merck's conversation right now, he's saying you have to have specialized hardware or you're a fool and you're losing money. Software, we're taking the specialized software and we're open sourcing that for the Prime. So that should democratize it more for the GPU channel or the Prime channel. And then having higher fees on there, then it makes it more profitable. So you actually won't be losing money. So more people can enter it. Right now, it's really tough to enter because it's hard to get those blocks going when, there's some larger mining farms. And I think if we make it more profitable, then I think that may help other people to start to gain a little bit more profits and join and build that ecosystem more. Which I'd really like to see. I'd like to see the Prime channel becoming more decentralized. Which I know it's still.
Scott's making a good point here that the mining rewards are going to continue to decay, and at some point they're not there.
Yeah.
There's enough there. So we need the fees to go. That's an argument for letting the go to proof of work miners as well, as it offsets the decay. Otherwise, there's in however many years' time, there's not going to be enough of an incentive for proof of work miners.
Yep. Okay, so I guess Made mentioned, I think we're in a little bit of philosophical debate when there's no more proof of work reward. Yeah, Merck, let's take that. Let's bring this conversation. You guys are both in the team Slack. Let's bring this conversation of the fees and exactly how we're going to manage that into the economics working group. I think that's important. I think we have a pretty good consensus that people don't want to burn fees. So we'll have to figure out exactly how they're redistributed from the reserve model. Using the reserve is very simple. We already have most of the technology to do that, so that should be good. Made said, let's talk about fees.
Actual amounts.
I mean,
I didn't want to do that right here. I think we probably need to
do that in the economics working group.
Because it is up for discussion. We basically said very loosely that there's a fee this big for registering a global name, this for doing a namespace, this for doing an asset and a token, and this for just normal transaction. So we know relatively where they need to be. We just don't know whether that's 10,000 Nexus and 1 Nexus, or 10 Nexus and 0.1 Nexus. Those we don't know those bounds yet. But here's a point I wanted to make earlier. We don't need to know. Well, we do need to decide before Tritium comes out what those values are. But they can be changed. The way that we have written our they call system registers, is that the right?
Yeah, we're not planning on implementing system register constant values in Tritium. I think we'll do that Tritium ++ just to stop scope drift.
Right. Okay. Good.
And we want the DAO. There's no real point. I mean, I could implement it now but then you have to have like a master sig chain that can update it, which is somewhat centralized. So we'll have the DAO orientated, a similar type of DAO vote, or maybe ambassadors can update that. Some sort of consensus to change these numbers, which means that consensus parameters such as block size, such as fees for, a token, fees for a global name, percentage that goes to miners, percentage that goes to stakers, let's say, all of these constants that plug into the engine to make it run will be modifiable without the need for a consensus update, which means there exists in a system register. Only the system can update it, and the only time the system will be able to update it is when we make certain stipulations of conditions being met. The conditions that we would want to be met would be, hey, these people, 10 ambassadors or 5 ambassadors voted in agreement of changing this, or the whole DAO voted in agreement, or whatever we want to do. So that's a Tritium ++ feature, but that should make the network a lot more extensible, and we won't have any block size debate issues. It'll essentially just be something that updates as soon as there's consensus among participants. So
yeah, Keith just made a point which we talked about at length, which is how we can vary the fee depending on the
system registers.
We know that this is issue, and we have to apply system registers. What we can't do, Keith, to answer your question, is we can't have Nexus rely on a third-party oracle to determine what the dollar value of Nexus is. It just it needs to be fully decentralized. So what we can't do is have it, tie into some API somewhere that says what the current dollar value is. Make sure that this fee is always 10 cents. It's just not achievable in a decentralized system. So instead, what we'll do is have the ability through a DAO to have the fee amounts change, so that if we get these kind of immediate spikes and back down, it's fine, it's not a problem. But as Nexus changes over time, as a community, the DAO can choose to or propose to change the fee from 1 Nexus to 0.1 Nexus, and then votes could be taken on that, and we can agree, and it can be updated, and it can be updated in real time without us requiring any fork of the network. That's the beauty of what we're proposing.
Yep.
And that's going to come in Tritium ++. Yeah, I thought we were going to try and weave it into Tritium, but you actually
we're at feature cutoff. Yeah,
we
no scope drift. So like features that are in, and we're hardening and testing. Otherwise, we never get Tritium out the door. So
we can set the initial numbers of what makes sense right now based on the current price of Nexus, and then we'll have the ability to change it when Tritium comes out.
Yep. So it's good to see. I guess I think that's pretty much most everything. Unless there's any questions or comments or suggestions or anything anybody has to say about it, I'd like to see some more discussions going on. So if you guys want to be a part of those discussions and you want your opinion to be a part of the decision, then join the working groups. Anybody can invite anybody in the Slack. I set it up so anybody can invite anyone. So if you want to invite people in, go for it. It's open. The working groups should be open public channels too. So feel free to bring people in there. Just, common thing, just be respectful of one another, like we always ask. And then we do polls and things like that. We try to keep as much consensus-oriented processes to get as much feedback on these types of decisions that affect everybody as possible. It's nice that the features of Tritium are done and that we're in our testing phases now, that feature cutoff has been passed, that we made our deadline that we set, surprisingly, by end of May, which is great. Security auditing firm, we ended up having a little more back and forth discussions and some miscommunication with them. When I thought they had started, they actually had misunderstood what the request was. So now we finally have completed the scope of work signature today for a full audit for everything. So you know how the audit is working. We're doing an initial higher level overview audit of the actual Electron wallet to make sure that there's no gaping holes in that. And then we'll probably be looking at releasing that relatively soon after that initial audit is done. And then kind of a 5-week audit is what they quoted us for the timeline. So they should be starting on that audit next Monday, I would say, with the kickoff call and everything. Unless you have any more details, Paul, you've been discussing things with them a little more.
It was our decision to change the scope because we originally wanted them to do two very distinct, one on the wallet code that was in alpha status months ago, and then a second audit of the Tritium code that we're releasing in the coming months. And it didn't make sense for them to cover the same ground twice. So we changed the scope so they could only do it once. So the way they're doing it is, as Colin said, they're concentrating on the Electron wallet now, and they are going to be giving us an initial thumbs up, thumbs down by the end of next week. And from that, we will be able to release the Electron wallet out of its alpha state. And then they're going to be doing
data, actually.
Oh, okay, sorry. They're going to be doing quite an invasive test of that over the following, whatever they said, 5 weeks or so. And the point is that if we can tick off all the major issues in the next week, likely problems, and they're happy, we can release it. And then anything that comes up after that, and I'm sure there's going to be minor things that are going to come up over the following 5 weeks. We can just do incremental updates to the wallet and get those out as and when they're needed. In parallel to that, starting probably towards the end of May, they will then start auditing the Tritium code to work with it. So it's one ongoing, long
constant, ongoing. It might be a little earlier than that, depending on our tests. The stability of it looks really good for my load tests. Hammering it with 150, 200 transactions per second. It was verifying those blocks like 900 transactions in 50 milliseconds. And it was verifying each transaction too. I think I calculated 13,000 per thread. So what is that, like 10 microseconds, 500? I had to actually go to microsecond granularity to honestly see how how fast they were, because they'd show up as 0 milliseconds. So it's fast, and it's the last sweep we did is making it even faster. And that's good to see kind of our L1. And it's cool that you'll be able to, we're not going to make Falcon keys defaults. just for the fact that it's still a new cryptography. But what's cool about signature chains, and I'm reiterating this from actually just very simply change your key by creating a new transaction. So the way it works right now is you just fire up your wallet with a new command line, Brain Pool or Falcon, and all of a sudden you have Falcon keys. And then if you decide you don't want to use Falcon, then you just choose Brain Pool again and then create a new transaction, and bam, you have Brain Pool keys. So that you can switch your keys whenever you want. If you're paranoid, you can change them whenever you want. So that's kind of a cool feature too. Now, like, you know, like you look at Zcoin, their fundamental cryptography was flawed. And what did they have to do? Like their whole network is obliterated, right? In this case, it's just, hey, if there's a flaw found even in Brain Pool, or, you know, we're going to allow like the Bitcoin key SECP256K1, and maybe an ED25519 curve, like a bunch of other stuff. So that you can just choose your curve, you know. So if any one of these curves, you know, they say, oh, there's a flaw found in it, you just go, oh, make a new transaction. And there's really no risk because your key is not even known until you make that transaction. So it's only in transit for that transaction that there's any vulnerability window. So it's pretty cool. It's cool how that works. So I'm really excited about that feature too, and the sig chain recovery options. So everything, yeah, we're rocking and rolling, and I guess it's been a very productive last 3 weeks. And now Paul he understands AMI now, or call it, which is pretty cool. Like, you should have seen the light bulbs go off when I said, but you won't need a sync. And he's like,
It's
what? It was great.
You know what? It's like that that scene in the Matrix where he looks up and he's like, I know Kung Fu. And it was just like that. It was like this, all this shit going on the board. And I suddenly just went, I get it. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah. So I mean, very much just, it's an extension of what we have now. And but the whole way we're going to be doing network sharding and data sharding, and it just makes so much more sense to me now. And I understand how the scaling is going to work, and how proof of stake is going to be inherently pooled, so that you know, stakers all become part of a group that gets paid together. So you know, there's no more stakers having to find one block. They all become part of a state channel, and you know, so we get pooled staking by default.
Yeah,
so cool shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and the file system. There's a lot of really cool features that you guys are gonna like with. I mean, yeah, and it just combines the best of all these really different worlds, and like, yeah, it's completely unique, and it should make our scaling, because right now our scaling is like, computationally it's like nothing. I mean, I ran register create without touching the LLD, just doing like post processing without actually writing the records, and it was 220,000 per second. I ran Falcon as fast as I could get that going, and that was 150,000 signature verifications per second. So like the register layers, ledger layers, they're fast, right? And obviously you add more complexities, you add more of these things in there, but the biggest thing is your data, right? Bitcoin blockchain, you have to synchronize this 300 gigabyte blockchain every time. So the data sharding is a really important quality. And the way Tritium's set up now is it's already modular enough. So like an operation has your verification, then your execution, and then your commit. Commit is just going to go boop, and it's going to just drop into the sharded LLD, and the network is going to do a lot of that lifting too. We have a really unique way that we're sharding with lists, and also having the aggregated layer sharding solves a lot of problems I think Ethereum and all the other guys have been trying to solve with like cross-shard communication. And since we also have deterministic register calculation, and registers themselves have a deterministic value of their address, and a sig chain is one that owns a register, you can very comfortably isolate all of these shards from one another and make sure that you don't have any conflicts, because there can't be any conflicts, because your sig chain is your sig chain. It's like a blockchain inside that block, or inside the blockchain, I guess you could say. So the way that our architecture is set up now, it's set up to be ready for sharding, which is what I'm going to be doing, which is going to be really cool to see that kind of come to life, and see what like a distributed network really looks like. I'm sure Dino will appreciate it when you don't have to think the wallet, because he says like, oh, you know, the first blockchains he got into is this isn't going to scale. Oh my gosh, I have to download this whole history. I have to manage all this. Like, you know, I mean, coming from a guy that, you know, did a lot of work on the internet. So seeing this sharding, I think, is going to be really, really cool. come to life. So that's exciting. And that's kind of what we were going over the other week, which was really good. It was a very, very productive week. It was good having Mike Casey and Paul in there. And yeah, so.
Yeah, we got through a lot that week. And it's nice for everyone to have an idea of what's coming up and why we're trying to do what we've been doing. And I know that, you know, the communities have had to wait a long time for Tritium to come out, but I hope when it does and they see what's can be built on it and where we're going with it, they realize why it's taken so long to do all this foundations. It's so important, and all the features that we want to build require a huge amount of infrastructure and having our layered architecture. And once it's done and out, we can then build so much more quickly. You know, use cases can come in and ask for, you know, APIs to be written, and it can all happen so much more quickly because we have a really well designed and well thought out architecture underneath, and we have the scaling solved and all those things. And then, you know, Armin is building features on top of the Tritium foundation, and all that stuff will just fall into place. You will see it. You'll see why so much time and effort has gone into Tritium.
And even just the thought of how contracts work too. I mean, Ethereum was designed to create these smart contracts, but they made it this super nerdy programming language. And then it's just like, well, how do I even make this contract between these people? And it's kind of like a static, like stack language. Like the way Tritium works is like you have the conditions between each, you know, the participant. The contract is, I have this, you have this, I want this, you want that. Let's set some conditions between us on the execution of that. And that's exactly what it does right now, which, you know, we hope as you guys really start to see that it makes these contracts useful, such as, you know, when I die, my sig chain should go to this person, or, you know, I want to trade this asset with Jack, or we want to go into an employment contract where you can be paid a certain amount, or, you know, different things like that, which, you know, we're going to really see a lot of that expand out, especially through Tritium++, which is really exciting. Because I think the promise of smart contracts hasn't fully been delivered yet. And it looks like we have a very, I guess, good, what's the word? We're very close to doing that. And we hope that people will see the value in it in the way that, you know, people wanted to see smart contracts. I think we're a very good candidate for being able to make them something that people can actually use. So,
yeah, I think the overwhelming majority of smart contracts are actually really simple. They don't need a full scripting language. There is there's a government offshoot in Australia called Data 61, and they did some analysis. They actually have real-time analysis of the Ethereum network of what transactions are taking place and you know, what those contracts look like. And it's some huge number, like 98% of all transactions that happen on the Ethereum network are smart contracts that are tied into the tokens basis. So there are ICOs, and it's just a really simple kind of token creation, and you're just passing tokens between token accounts. And so, you know, almost all contracts that occur on this incredibly complex platform that Ethereum is a really, really simple token to, you know, account to account.
But the thing is, like, the way that they manage, have to, like, each contract has to manage the entire state, and Ethereum has to keep the entire global state in blocks and everything. I mean, it's a prototype on the technology. It's just there's no wonder it doesn't scale. They don't have a block size, and they can only do 7 transactions a second. It's because there's so much state. I mean, I get like adding one extra LLD read, which the LLD beats level DB by orders of magnitude. And it's still like, I see, okay, well, this is slowing me down by, you know, so many milliseconds and whatever. I mean, the database and the data layer and the disk reading and writing is your fundamental bottleneck. And there, you know, an ERC20 token has to manage the state of every single token holder in that. And you have to update this giant state every single transaction. With Nexus, it's like create a token, debit. Like you only have to do one little teeny database read for every one of them. So debits and credits transfer for tokens just as easily and fast as the Nexus native token. So I think, you know, for the use of tokens and, you know, applying those tokens with temporal proofs and everything, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff there. And I'm really excited to see it kind of come to life. And start programming. I just started programming in the programming language that I created today. It was pretty fun. Jack's been watching me code it in assembly. It's like, let's see what this thing could do. You know, you envision all of the possibilities of, I want to have all these different things. But then when you start putting it together, it's kind of like putting together Legos and seeing what you can really build. So it's an exciting time, guys. And yeah, I mean, we're happy that we were able to have this discussion on the economics. I think that's important to have. I think we got a pretty solid consensus on, we want fees to go somewhere. There's a little bit of disagreement on where and how much. So we'll figure those things out in the economics working group. We got all of the invites. Let's see, just send invites and just send, look like if you want an invite into the team Slack. The team Slack's for, you know, if you want to kind of get more involved beyond just being, you know, in the community Slack where you start wanting contributing more, or, you know, there's a lot of different working groups in there. And to reiterate, the reason we have working groups is they're decentralized groups of people that self-manage, and there's no central leader. It's each group manages itself, kind of like a cell in the body. And these cells themselves can, you know, how should I say it, self-organize so that, you know, people of more synergy tend to collect together and they naturally form. So it's been cool because these groups of ours just naturally forming, you know, and people find the groups of people that they start working well together with. And so that's kind of our aim at creating decentralized social structure. So that's kind of what we're still experimenting lately in the Slack and the team Slack. So come in and be a part of that and, you know, help give suggestions and feedback on that. If you want to talk about the social org, there's the social working group too. And some of the actual social working group white paper outlining some of these concepts. So yeah, join the working groups if you'd like to get more involved. I think the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned. So.
Before we finish up, because I know we're heading towards a close, there is a question in that. Are there any updates on Lisp and Lisp Decent? What's going on with Lisp Decent at the moment? Is there
Dino, do you want to give a Lisp update?
Sure. So the mapping system has been, and the RTRs that support NAT traversal have been up and running for several months now. We're keeping that stable, and we're not upgrading those nodes unless we absolutely have to. Right now, there's no reason to. We're looking at the Nexus nodes, and when we start running testnet, obviously they could run Lisp as well or not, depending on what your preference is. But we're pretty much ready to go on that. The applications and use cases we're looking at are running on top of Lisp as well in a more of a private blockchain that Colin was referring to. We are running the pull-based Lisp Decent in these because it's simple to configure, and we want to test out the technology we just recently built. And it just seems to be working as we designed. It's such a simple design that it was easy to not only implement, but to deploy. And so we're doing a lot of testing on these various use cases that we're trying to run on top of it. So and part of the sharding stuff that Colin was and Paul were talking about was using a VPN-based system. And so as we are going to have these different permission groups and access control, we can implement different VPNs by just having EIDs registered to these different instance IDs. And that can keep things separate. Closed user groups, open user groups. And if they want to interoperate, we know how to do that. There's a lot of, there's several internet drafts that say how you do extranetting between VPNs if that's necessary. But there's really no limit on you and a single EID being part of multiple VPNs. It's a multi-tenancy sort of use case that we've used in the data center for many years. So this is just another example of that. So like the guys were saying, there's a lot more to come with Amin coming around, and we're going to get multicast going, which will be really fun. Nobody really, it's the only way these things are going to scale, and nobody really has any clue that this is the solution to the problem. So.
Yep. Thank you, Dina. Yep. It's been a lot of fun to play around with Lisp and to kind of, I guess, start to figure out all these really cool use cases. And Lisp is going to play a vital role in our sharding too. And I guess I can say just a little bit of how it's going to work. Imagine if you could go to your web browser, now this is assuming that network layer is running HTTP, and type in a hash as your web address, and that hash would be a TXID, and then what would happen is you would send the request out and you would get that transaction back, or you would get that block back. So the index or the hash or the checksum of the object is the object's IP address. And then under the hood, we manage the way that is happening, so that from the higher levels, you're essentially opening up connections to hashes. And you basically, by running Lisp decent and connecting to the network, you basically have access to the entire global state of the network without having to do any other management. It's just Lisp doing what Lisp does best. And the validators that have validated that specific code are essentially becoming subscribers to be one of those RLOCs subscribing to that specific piece of data. So it's really easy to move data around and to shard it in that way. But the cool thing about it is you don't have to manage all of these shards and like, oh, this is in this shard and that is in that shard and yada, 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 yada. You just make one simple request for that piece of data and it goes out across the internet and comes back with the data for you. So that it's almost like you are accessing a local database, but it's a global sharded database that's shared among everybody around the world. So that's pretty exciting, and it wouldn't be possible without Dino. So yeah, Dino is a legend, says iPhone. So pass that on to you, Dino. You're a legend. Thank you for being a part of everything.
There's another question in the group chat. Will audit findings be made available to you guys as they're discovered, or will it be contained in a final report? I have a call with the auditors. The company is Independent Security Evaluators, ISE. I have a call with them tomorrow to discuss exactly this. They will be writing up a final report for us, but we want to keep in contact with them as they go through their audit process, because we do want more immediate feedback. As I said, they're already going to be giving us an initial report on the Electron wallet at the end of next week, and I'd like that to continue with a weekly just internal report to see whether they found anything glaring or anything that we can get working on, because there's no point us waiting until the very end and getting a report and then having to work on it.
Yep.
So we'll have that discussion with them tomorrow.
Yep. So we'll let you know, I guess. If there's anything else, I think that covered all of our discussions. Just reiterate, Tritium soon. No, I mean, it's actually done now. It's great. So security audits, we'll get results back. We'll report to you guys when that's done. Final month of testing. Soon as June. I like it, Dino. That's much better. Soon as June. Uh-oh. Now we got a new one coming. Anyway, we got that. We got DAO. Join working groups if you want to discuss things. If you have any concerns, join working groups. Still hungry, baby? Sorry, my daughter. Join working groups if you want to be a part of discussions. Yeah, don't hold back. If you have any concerns, comments, Nexus has always been community built. More opinions is better than none. So make sure you share, join the team Slack, join the working groups. We'll continue the discussions there, and we'll do our next Zoom in 2 weeks, I believe.
Dino's on fire here. Soon as June.
Oh,
in July.
July in July. Oh, man. That's
What
pretty good.
Dino? These things are going to stick now, right?
That's great. All right. Well, there we go. Soon as June, but we fly in July. Somebody make some T-shirts. I think Alberic, or was it Art? No, it wasn't Arsene. I think it was Alberic. Alberic, you had a nice little T-shirt up. If you're around, somebody tell Alberic to make that. Soon as June, but we fly in July. I like it. Actually, that's really good. On that note, soon as June, but we fly in July, and we shall catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you.